Well, welcome. This is Success Secrets and Stories special program called Stories Author to Author. I'm your host, John Wondolowski, and we get a chance to discuss with the author their motivations, their approach to writing a book, and subjects that are near and dear to their hearts. Today, I'd like to introduce Will Sampson, and I should say Dr. Sampson. What is your preference?
Will is fine.
Will is fine. Awesome.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
Will, I've seen some very interesting posts on LinkedIn, and one of them that kind of caught my eye was what great leaders know and what good ones don't know. Why don't we talk about a little bit about what you were going through the 15 components of that post and what you were trying to get across?
Yeah. What I find, certainly in my own life and in my own experience as I work with leaders, is that so often there's this idea of that we need to be in complete control. There's a command and control idea that still dominates leadership in the way we do it, particularly in America and the West, but not exclusively. And what I was really hoping to get out, the idea I was really hoping to move forward in that the 15 things that great leaders do post was really that great leaders allow others to shine. Right. So they give credit early. They listen with the intention to understand. They ask for help before everything starts to fall apart. We have this idea in our culture of this sort of perfect individual who is able to do everything themselves. And that human doesn't exist. I mean, the example I often give is of Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, we think of as this most successful entrepreneur, and yet he was really struggling before he met Tim Cook. And Tim Cook came along and provided operational excellence that enabled Jobs to ship product, which included initially upgrades to the Mac and the iMac, but then the iPhone and all that. And so what I was hoping to do in that post is really establish that great leaders are not great themselves. Great leaders are those who are able to develop others, to listen to others. And oftentimes they're able to do that because they have taken control of their own lives. I call it radical self-ownership. It's a big part of my coaching methodology, but great leaders are able to be great, not because they can force other people or bend other people to their will, but because they're able to bring other people into the journey that they're guiding them on.
And maybe we can talk a little bit about what you're doing now, because you're doing consulting, you're doing leadership seminars, and you're also working on another book. And I think all of those kind of intertwine. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what you're doing now.
You bet. Yeah. So I worked for a number of years. So I'm a kind of a strange mix. I have a master's in IT and a PhD in sociology. So I spent a lot of years thinking about how people in groups use technology. And what I realized after a number of successful engagements, I did a number of large mergers and acquisitions. I've done, large technology integrations. But what I keep coming back to is the fact that it is the successful leader that is able to really bring about the change. So, when I started as a technologist, and I'm going back several decades now,
right.
Technology was the barrier. It was difficult to build the technology to do the things we wanted to do. Now, not just with AI, but certainly with a variety of disruptive technologies. Technology is not the issue anymore. So it really does end up focusing very heavily on the leader. And what I kept finding, and this was similar to my own experience, was that leaders lacked the resilience to lead. And it mirrored my own story. I was kind of at the top of my game. I was the director of change for a 53,000 person organization, leading a $12 billion merger, and miserable. I couldn't imagine continuing to do that. And I walked away from that. Yeah. And there were some other things that were going on. I also, part of my story is moving through the recovery process, addiction recovery process. So I had to deal with some of that as well. But in that journey, what I learned is that it is the resilience of the leader that actually gives that person the ability to lead. It's not having all these tricks or these hacks or
Right.
whatever, 5 quick ways to this or 10 easy steps to that. In fact, it's when the leader, first of all, owns their own story, their own
Yeah.
narrative, the stories they're telling themselves. They own their actions, management by responsibility, which I know you talk a lot about,
Right.
and then leading into interdependence. Because what I find is that when leaders are able to really own their own story, they understand who they are and what their purpose and contribution is in the world, then they're quite happy to let other people succeed in their areas of excellence as well. I call them green lights, but green lights are those things that like we know we're good at, other people have told us we're good at, but we also
Sure.
get a lot of energy from doing. And I find it is that resilient leader who is taking radical self-ownership that can let other people thrive as well.
And I think, pressure in some of the jobs that I've had, not at the same level, but pressure isn't unique to that level or that assignment. It's pretty universal. Um,
Mhm.
but that element of self awareness and that element of being able to sometimes, you know, pray or meditate or take time for yourself. Maybe you can speak a little bit about that, but because I think it's leading up to some of the things that you have been talking about recently.
Absolutely. Yes. And again, one of the greatest teachers in my life has been addiction, because
Mm,
what you find in that process is you have so much control, and there's a lot of things over which you don't have control. In the midst of my journey, I picked up a book by Viktor Frankl. It's called Man's Search for Meaning, and he says that the greatest human freedom, the one that can never be taken away from us, is the freedom to choose our own attitude in any given situation.
yeah.
And what I realized was that we are never victims of what other people have done. Most of that, it relates to what story are we going to tell about that, and also, do we believe in the goodness of the universe? And for you, that may be a belief in God. It may be a belief in some other, higher power.
Right.
But what I learned in the process of my own recovery, what I learned in the process of my own journey, and then kind of building my own business, was that when I'm willing to believe in the goodness of myself and the goodness of others, and in the belief that the world was aligned for my goodness, that the world was waiting for me to help contribute to the future of a better planet. When I came to believe that, then I
Yeah.
was able to grow myself and also to grow others and grow a team around me of people who believe that.
That's awesome. So you're in a team, your company right now is developed so that you can help corporate as well as teams, and you're doing lectures. Maybe you can talk a little bit about your organization and how it's been crafted to help other people.
Yeah. So everything we do is around this idea of resilience. And just a little nerd alert, because I was a former software developer. I call my
Nerd,
I call
nerd
my
alert.
coaching methodology a resilience stack. So
Okay.
we write software in stacks, and in the same way, I think we rewrite our internal operating system in stacks. And this is really the basis for everything we do. It's the basis for our coaching. It's the basis for the learning labs that I hold. It's the basis for the courses that I'm putting out and the book that I'm getting ready to finish before the year is out. Um, and it follows along 5 basic steps. One is owning our own internal narrative. We in recovery, a lot of times we use remember the old movie metaphor, the caller is inside the house. Like you're
Oh God,
you're
yeah,
you're
yeah.
worried, like where's the danger
What?
coming from, and it's the
Yeah,
bad guy on the upstairs extension. And so often the executives I work with, they're trying to figure out where the problem is outside of them, and they don't begin by asking, what stories am I telling myself?
yeah,
So layer 1 is sort of rewriting our internal narratives. Layer 2 is radical self-ownership. You could call it management by responsibility, but it's that idea that I am in charge of everything I'm in charge of. Yes, there are many things that I can't control. there are things that I expect others to do if they're on my team or part of my effort. But I'm in charge of me. And it's that idea of, I call it radical self-ownership, because it really goes down to the root of who we are.
Yeah.
That then layer 3 allows us to lean into interdependence, to begin to understand that everybody else is just like us, trying to figure out what their purpose is, how they succeed in the world. And then layer 4 is to begin to build a system for ongoing growth. And then finally, to figure out how to lead from that internally changed state outward, rather than trying to lead by management by tricks or techniques. It's really management by internal transformation. And that's the basis of the work that we do with teams. It's the basis of the work that I do with individual C-level executives and entrepreneurs. And it's the basis of the course and the book that we're putting out.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think the other part that I found in the little bit of that I've been doing in terms of coaching is, as a leader, you're leading people now. It isn't the technology. It isn't the mechanics of what you're doing and how you're being perceived and what you do to keep current and to be relevant. All those things that the ability of self-awareness starts to kick in, that I think really, I think the biggest challenge for somebody who's new is to understand that step away from being a technocrat.
Right.
And how to step back now and to be responsible for other people and to develop your replacement, which is one of the interesting things for the kind of operational jobs that I've been in. If I don't have a person that can take my place, I'm never going to get promoted. You know, putting that 2 cents into what does leadership really mean? How are you applying it?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, very much so. I totally agree with that sentiment. And I think it's also true that we have to recognize the moment we're in. So there's a couple forces. One is what we sometimes talk about as demographic winter. So just humanly, we made more baby boomers than we made Gen Xers. And so the average age of a senior manager today is 58 years old. So we have to recognize that nurturing people and growing them into leadership positions is critical. And then on the sort of the other end, demographically or generationally, are the younger individuals entering the workforce who have zero desire to be in management because they've seen all of the problems with it.
Yeah.
We're seeing, it's difficult to recruit and retain really great workers. And that's true in the tech industry, but it's true across the board.
Right.
Cost of money is going up. I mean, there's all these kind of leadership challenges that are sort of outside of the leader. And what I've found in my own experience, what I have found in my coaching, what I have found in the successful leaders I've worked with is that they're able to manage the things outside of them when they can successfully manage the things inside of them, when they're able to manage those internal narratives and take a radical sense of self-ownership, take a complete responsibility for themselves and what they're leading in the world.
That is so much to the point that you're writing the book about it. Right. And that is dead center to what I think really makes a difference to people in terms of understanding that they've taken on that responsibility, and also if they're short in terms of skill sets or background or exposure or conversations with their staff, they have to do that correction. They have to engage.
Precisely. Yeah. And there are no shortcuts. And this is another thing. So we just got done. We interviewed 200 C-level executives, and we asked them about their resilience and how they practice resilience in their work. And one theme that we were surprised at, and it's something I'm getting ready to be writing about more over the next weeks and months, is that they're really disillusioned with the sort of hack culture, or the idea that there's some quick, easy fix to these problems.
So true. Yeah.
Right now if you want to sell content on the internet, promise somebody that it's quick or easy or painless. And the reality is great leadership, personal growth, none of those things. They are none of those things, right? And so really encouraging people to lean into the longer term work of internal transformation, radical self-ownership, and interdependence, I think is absolutely critical.
So true. The other post that I thought was interesting is Cheat codes I wish I knew at 55, which I thought that was pretty funny because you're looking, so us baby boomers, and I'm guilty of that category.
Right.
And just somebody else reading it in their 20s or 30s going, no, it can't relate to me. Oh, yes, it does. And maybe you can talk about a little bit about that, because I thought there was some pearls of wisdom there that really could be shared.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was a fun post. And again, it came out of my own experience. So if you want an interesting thought exercise, just open up, a search engine and search for entrepreneurs or executives who succeeded later in life. And what you'll find is Colonel Sanders, Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's,
Right.
and then a bunch of 30-year-olds. And my own, which is hardly later in life.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and so my own personal experience, John, is that I in that experience I related to you earlier. I was 54, but I was almost 55 at the time,
Right.
and I really had to kind of go deep at that point and say, okay, what am I supposed to be learning? What are some of the cheat codes that I think are true here? Because we so often think like we've got these, we still live with these stratified generational ideas. Like 55 is when you're starting to move toward retirement, and 60 you're looking for the home on the golf course, and by 65 you're out of the game. I'm thankful that I didn't have that experience in my own family situation. So when my dad was, I think he was 62 years old, he and my mom sold everything they had and they moved to Africa to do
Wow.
to do NGO type work. And so I've got this, I've got this sort of programming in my brain that says, no, 60 is not that old. 65 is not even that old. And because we know people are going to be living longer, I really wanted to encourage people to think more broadly about what we have to contribute. Because again, even having made it to the end of an executive life, so maybe you're in your 60s, or late 50s, early 60s, there's still a ton of possibility and a ton of work to be done. And I think with all the chaos happening in the market right now, I think one of the most exciting opportunities is the opportunity for entrepreneurship around some of these significant problems that we just haven't figured out a way to solve. And it is those of us with a little more experience that are really able to imagine what those ways we could solve some of those problems. And I liked, you were talking before we started the podcast, you were talking about the idea of being on the bus. Like, are you the driver of the bus, or are you
Right.
a rider on the bus? And I love that because it's actually a metaphor I use with a lot of my coaching clients. So I will ask, I'll do a thought experiment with my coaching client, and I say, okay, imagine I want you to walk out to your driveway in your imagination, walk out to your driveway, get in your car. Now your hands are on the steering wheel. Where do you want to go? Where are you going to go? And they'll say, well, I don't know. I say, okay, great. So now we know, where we want to start, because the reality is we can go anywhere, and with, longer life expectancy, greater health, other kinds of tools, like we can imagine we're going to live longer. So maybe you're late 50s, 60s, maybe even early 70s. You're still behind the steering wheel. Where do you want to drive?
Yeah. And I think the other part that you brought up that was very interesting is a concept that I learned a little bit about: satisfaction. When do you have enough? When is enough actually accomplished? What is the magic number? Well, I already know the number doesn't exist, because
Right.
billionaires still want more.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the happiest people I know worked with me, in the facilities world, and the facilities people aren't really making a ton of cash.
Right.
But there's that element of life and love and accomplishment and satisfaction. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that, and especially how that relates to the things that you've learned where you found peace in that process.
You bet. Yeah. And you're right. I have written about enough. Actually, I wrote a book with that name. It was a number of years ago.
Right.
But what I learned in the process of recovery, what I've learned over the last several years, because the other thing was I started my business. I had the genius idea to start my business in early 2020. And so I'm just getting going when COVID
Right.
hits and the whole world is shutting down. And what I learned, again, this goes back to those internal narratives, these stories we tell ourselves, that if I am looking for a measurement of enough by somebody else's metric, so maybe that's Instagram impressions, maybe it's sales, maybe it's the prestige of my client base.
Right.
There's a whole variety of things. What I continue to be struck by is that in some ways that's its own form of addiction. Those of us who have gone through recovery
Yes.
realize that the greatest lie we told ourselves was the belief that we needed something from outside of ourselves to come inside of ourselves in order to be happy, healthy, whole, whatever that is.
Right.
And the same is true for the next big deal for a hedge fund billionaire. The same is true for a content creator trying to create content on Instagram or LinkedIn. It's that idea that we need something from outside of us in order to find contentment, wholeness, and even a sense of healing. Like even in terms of our own trauma, oftentimes I'm a big believer in internal family systems therapy. If you're familiar with that model, it's the idea that we have parts within us that are sort of trying to protect us, trying to help us achieve what matters in the world. And it's really only when we are able to understand the authentic self and what that authentic self desires that we can then begin to say, okay, out of those desires, what can I actually begin to accomplish and create in the world in a very concrete way, and in a way that makes for a better future for my grandchildren and beyond.
And so much of the fears right now, and I know that's one of the things that I was intrigued when I was looking at your background, the monster that is out there right now is AI. And your experience and the knowledge, I'm sure you're talking people off the edge because
I do.
Yeah, it's the fear of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that humans are still involved in the process in order to steer the ship. But maybe you could talk a little bit about what you have done and how you're setting people up for this next generation of what computers can do.
You bet. Yeah. And I was fortunate because I did my IT graduate work in the early 2000s. We were talking a lot about neural networks. And so I've been involved in AI really since almost, I wouldn't say since the beginning, but for about 2 decades now. And a lot of what I get to do with clients, in fact, we're working with a large law firm in the Middle East right now. And we have people on the team who are able to do the technology enablement and all that. And I don't do as much of that anymore because most of what I do is help them tell a better story about a tool like AI, because the story we say is that's going to disrupt everything. It's going to make everything difficult. It's going to make people redundant and so on. But like every other technology that we humans have invented, going all the way back to, fire and the wheel, it's just a technology, right? And the question is, how will we use it? Will we use it to grow ourselves? Will we use it to make the world a better place? Or will we use it to enrich ourselves and, be kind of selfish in our resources? And those are things that over time we've seen be done with all of the technologies we've invented. So in some ways, we're just in a new technology era. I will say though, there's a kind of a bigger thing happening, which is that there's a historian who said that we basically, as humans, we kind of reinvent ourselves about every 500 years, and we're also kind of in that time as well. I think what that gives us is what it should give us is a greater sense of agency. So if so much more is possible now than was ever possible before, we can have the attitude of fearfulness and be afraid of that possibility, or we can practice agency and say, wow, imagine what we could do now. Imagine what could we actually create? I'm working with a team in the Research Triangle area there are 3 people who fully anticipate being the first tech unicorn or a $1 billion valuation with
Sure.
no more than 10 employees. And that's what AI is making possible. And so when we look at a lot of companies, particularly that have been either late to the game in terms of adoption of AI, or they're not typically disruptive industries like
Right.
legal or healthcare or so on. There's just tons of possibilities, and the question is not can we make the technology match the need. The question is, can we tell a story that allows us to do that? That's really what matters. And so I get to hold the hands of a lot of leaders.
Come back off the edge. You're okay. You're okay.
Yeah, exactly. And thankfully, my background as a coach,
Right.
and even to a degree with all of the other ways I've counseled people through some of their struggles in their life, like I get to practice that in the corporate space as well.
No, that's awesome. We're getting close to the end of our interview. I wanted to ask a couple questions. Mm-hmm. Specifically, I like the idea of your book, the book that you're working on. I know it's a working title, so they have to keep their eyes open for Will Sampson's next book. The working title is what again?
Is The Resilience Stack.
Okay, perfect. And
a 5-layer process for building resilience from the inside out.
And as an author, just out of curiosity, a book, maybe 2 books that you've read recently that you were intrigued by.
Oh, wow. For anybody watching this on video, you'll see just one of my bookshelves behind me.
Yeah.
Probably one of the great books I've read lately is by somebody that I happen to have the pleasure of knowing. His name is Brad Stuhlberg, and it's called Masters of Change. It's a very, very powerful book. Because I've done so much work in change and change management and personal change, personal development, I tend to read a lot of those books. But I do think anything you can get your hands on by Brad Stuhlberg is a great read right now.
Okay. So we're close to the end. Is there contact information that people can learn more about your organization? What should they do? Your website?
Yep. Yeah. So the website is the sort of the launching pad for everything. So it's Will Sampson, and there is no P in Sampson, willsampson.com. You can learn more about learning labs there. You can sign up for my newsletter. And you can also follow just all the content that we're putting out. I do a Substack every week. So every week I put out one large Substack article and then 2 smaller ones. We're doing our own podcast. So we're really trying to create content in a variety of channels right now, sure. But they all relate to this primary concept, which is that when leaders are willing to work on internal resilience and rewrite their internal narratives and take radical self-ownership, that the possibilities they haven't even imagined the possibilities when they're willing to do that work. And that's really the basis. Everything we're putting out is around that, including the learning labs. So we do half-day and one-day seminars for executive teams, organizations. We call them learning labs because that's really the model. I mean, I'm an educator as well, and so
right.
Like the idea of me standing in front of people and just talking at them for 4 hours sounds as terrible to me as it would to them.
True.
And so what we try to do is engage leaders in we try to create a series of engaging exercises that really help them move toward that place of resilience and self-ownership.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. So that kind of wraps up our episode of Stories Author to Author. Thank you, Will, for all your insight. Wish you the best with the book.
Thank you.
So I hope this helped in terms of diving into the creative process of writing a book and the things that Will has been working on. I hope to talk to you someday about the efforts on you telling your story. So until next time, keep reading, keep writing, and keep sharing those stories. See you soon.